Hey, Crystal Maiden here, and welcome to part 2 of Sonic 3D Blast. Now, in the previous part, I told you all about what the Sega Saturn was about as a console. And here I'm going to be focusing more on the differences between the Saturn and Genesis version of the game. One of the major differences is that Rusty Ruin Zone, which we're playing right now, it has a really annoying fog in the Saturn version that makes it harder to see where you are and where the enemies are. So it's easy to run into stuff and screw up the platforming. Because that's what isometric platforming needs, fog. And most of the game does not really force you to platform, but Rusty Ruin is my least favorite level in the game because there's this one part of it where you have to land a jump on a platform that's going really far away. And if you fail to land, then you're sent really far back in the level and you have to backtrack all the way over to where you were before. So thankfully I could just make a save state and load a state, because otherwise that would have been really painful. Like every time I played this game legitimately, like I played through Sonic 3D No Flickies before this, and I guess you could consider that a test playthrough. But every time I try to play this game normally, without using ROM hacks, I always rage quit by the time I get here. And that's probably part of why. I like the gimmick of Rusty Ruin Zone, where you stand on these things that spin you around like a ballerina, and you can move towards breakable pillars and stuff to break through them and progress with the level. I mean, your movement and momentum is really slippery when you're spinning around like that, so it's kind of hard to control, but you don't really have to worry too much because it's not like you're on a time limit and you're only spinning around for a certain amount of time. That's what I used to think, but it's really not a big deal. You can take as long as you want. You can be as careful about it as you want, and you'll eventually get to where you need to go. Because if you run into a wall while you're spinning around, then you'll bounce off it, like you're bouncing off the walls after spin dashing into the Sonic Labyrinth. But it's not really that big of a deal. You really don't want to get hit when you're spinning around like that, because if you get hit, then you won't be spinning around anymore. So I like that gimmick. Although it sucks when you have no idea that something's coming up where you have to break through it while spinning, but you didn't realize that you had to do it, and so you have to go all the way back to the little spinny things, and so it forces you to backtrack. You probably noticed some tiny Sonic heads over springs. Those don't give you extra lives, even though they can make the extra life tingle, which is needlessly confusing. Instead, you have to collect a certain amount of them in order to get an extra life. I mean, I think you would get continues if you collect enough of them. And continues basically act as extra lives after you lose all of your lives. And unfortunately, some of the continues are impossible to get without having enough flickies with you, because you jump on the springs with enough flickies, and the flickies will trail behind you, and they'll go above you when you jump on the springs, and so they'll collect the continue icon for you. But yeah, it's just really annoying how you have to collect multiple Sonic icons to get a continue. Like, why can't you just collect one? I mean, I guess it would make the game too hard to get a game over in, but do you really want to get a game over in a game as dull and repetitive as this? I mean, I actually had a pretty fun time playing this for the Let's Play, but that's because I wasn't playing it collecting flickies, which I think is the best way to play the game. But unfortunately, if you play it normally, you're gonna get really bored because of how dull and repetitive it is. That's why, like, that's a big reason why I didn't play the normal version, which I have on Sonic Mega Collection. Then I didn't have access to save states, so I would have had to do this level without save states, which would have been painful. I kind of appreciate how you constantly go through loops, and you go into these things that force you into a spin dash, and like there's genuine fast parts of this game. Even though you're exploring the entire level, you're still going through it pretty fast. Like, you can still constantly run and jump. You jump upstairs, but it doesn't really feel nearly as boring as in the 2D Sonic games. So, there's plenty of differences between the Saturn version of the game and the Genesis version. I already mentioned the annoying fog in this level in the Saturn version. There's a lot of graphical changes that they made for the Saturn version. Like, Green Grove Zone isn't really all that green. I'm not really sure why they thought that was a good idea. And the final boss of the game, the one that you beat when you get all the Chaos Emeralds, in the Saturn version of the game, it looks a lot better because the background isn't just a boring black screen. Although I think that the floor, that looks a lot better in the Genesis version, but the background itself is pretty boring. So there's multiple different giant rings that you can grab onto and hang on to. Sometimes it can be hard to grab onto them because of the lack of depth perception. But the ones with X's below them are the exit to the level. And the ones without X's below them just progress you through the level. A lot of people prefer the Saturn version of the game, and I think part of the reason, or the major reason, is because they prefer the way it looks graphically. But I think that's a really superficial reason to like the game, just because it has good graphics. I mean, I think the game looks really good, even on the Genesis. Although, that intro cutscene was pretty cringeworthy. 3D Sonic moving around. He looked terrible. Like he looked all polygonal. He looked like he came straight out of the N64, but even worse. They had originally planned to make the first 3D Sonic game on the Saturn. But then they decided to put it on the Dreamcast, and that's good because the Dreamcast is a lot more powerful than the Saturn. Like, if they released the first 3D Sonic game on Saturn, it would have been really underwhelming. There's also plenty of other differences. I don't think that the Saturn version of the game is all that great, to be honest. I mean, the original Sonic 3D Blast wasn't that great either, but there's plenty of reasons I think that the Genesis version is better. One of them is the soundtrack. I love the soundtrack of the Genesis version. Like, I love how that's his idle animation. But the soundtrack of the Genesis version is so catchy. It's so easy for the songs to stick in your head, and they sound like Sonic songs should sound like. Like, you never forget any of the songs in this version of the game. A lot of people prefer the Saturn soundtrack, but I listened to all of it in one video on YouTube at one point, because I thought, maybe the Saturn soundtrack isn't that bad. Maybe I should give it a chance. But aside from Volcano Valley, the Saturn soundtrack is pretty generic and forgettable. It's not really all that great. There's a reason that they only remixed the Genesis versions of the songs. I hate that part. That right there is why I consider this to be the worst level in the game. Because if you fall down there, you have to do a ton of backtracking to get back to where you were. Makes me grateful that they don't have much platforming in this game. Because isometric platforming does not work. Because you can't tell depth perception. I love how they brought the elemental shields back in this game. Like, they didn't give back the air dash that you have with the flame shield and Sonic 3 Knuckles. But that would be kind of annoying in a game like this. So I don't really mind. What they did give back was the immunity to fire. The flame shield can be really useful in this game because of its immunity to fire. especially in Volcano Valley. Every level in the game is an alliteration when it comes to its names. It's just like Sonic CD, where it has Palm Tree Panic, Wacky Workbench, Tidal Tempest. Like, what is it about Sonic games having alliterations for names? I like it, but I hate those slidey floors. I hate how you land on them and you arbitrarily slide off like they're made of ice or something. It forces you to get the platforming right and bounce on things that, and you can't really, because of the isometric camera view, it's kind of hard to tell exactly how you're supposed to get from one platform to the next. And you might think that you can't jump far enough to reach the next area, but you can. But thankfully, you can skip plenty of them. There are lots of annoying isometric platforming sections, but you can just skip them, so it's no big deal. So yeah, I don't think the soundtrack is better in the Saturn version. I don't think the graphics are all that better. I mean, even if they are, who cares about graphics? I mean, it's all about the gameplay. I mean, it's true, like, gameplay is really the most important thing. This boss is kind of annoying, but it's not all that difficult. Oh, god damn it. What you gotta do is you gotta land on top of its paws, I guess, and dodge its attacks. And after landing on top of its hand, you gotta ride it while it's going back, and then you gotta jump towards the Eggmobile, and that'll damage it. And you gotta do that over and over again. I really like how there's rings in the arena, so that you can restock if you lose rings. Like, I think that's a really good thing. It was the Game Gear games that introduced having Act 3s with only boss fights in them, and having rings in them. So this wasn't the first Sonic game to do that, but I think it's a really good thing that they have rings in the arenas. But yeah, the boss fights in this game can be kind of annoying because of the isometric platforming perspective. So it can be kind of hard to tell how exactly you have to jump into the boss. And you can swear that you hit it, but you didn't. And they can hit you pretty easily. Odd-numbered boss fights and even-numbered boss fights have their own separate boss themes. Which is good, because I guess they didn't have enough time to give every single boss its own theme. So this is a good enough compromise to me. I feel like the even-numbered boss theme is too repetitive. It's too short. Like, there's not enough to it, so it can get pretty annoying. But I still think it sounds pretty good, regardless of that. But I prefer the odd-numbered boss theme. Like, I really like how intimidating it is. But now we come to Spring Staduium Zone. And I feel like it's too overstimulating to look at. It's kind of hard to tell what you can walk on and what you can't when you first go into it. Like the yellow squares there, you can't walk on them. The red circles are springs that launch you. Or some of them are. It's impossible to tell which ones will launch you and which ones won't until you've actually been launched by them. And sometimes it can be really annoying to get them to launch you. There's also bumpers everywhere, and those floors will often have spikes coming out of them. And it's really annoying losing your rings to the spikes. Like, bullshit, like I had 50 rings there, and I could have given those rings to get a special stage, but no. I kinda like the music of Spring Staduium, but it's not all that great. And it's kinda hard to... There are some times when you're expected to collect a row of rings by bouncing off springs, and a good way to figure out how exactly you're supposed to get the rings is to pay close attention to the red circles. And if you see a shadow on them, that's the rings shadow. And so that can give you a clue as to how exactly you're supposed to collect the rings. But it's kind of hard because of the isometric perspective. Like, I think this level is pretty annoying to go through. It can be kind of it's too brightly colored, and the places that you can't walk on aren't obvious enough that you can't walk on them. They're not high above you or anything. And it's annoying trying to get the springs to launch you sometimes. I do like the balloons though. Like, I like how they send you upwards. Although I prefer the ones from Carnival Night Zone. I feel like they send you upwards a lot better. It's kind of hard to jump into the balloons with an isometric perspective. I just hate how the bumpers always push you all over the place, and I hate the pinball flippers. Like, they try to make this a pinball level, but it's a flat area with an isometric perspective, so it doesn't really work. You can't have pinball in an isometric game, so all the pinball flippers and bumpers really do is just push you around in directions you don't want to go. But yeah, there's plenty of other differences between the Saturn version and the Genesis version, and I'll go over them in the next part.